Hi, and welcome to Lee on the Lectionary, and this week we're looking at the readings for the week known as Proper 19, and those readings are Genesis chapter 50 verses 15 to 21, Romans chapter 14 verses 1 to 12, and Matthew chapter 18 verses 21 to 35. The theme of our readings this week is living as those who have been forgiven by God and serve Him alone. Living as those who have been forgiven by God and serve Him alone. In any community, especially a Christian community, which is by definition full of sinful people who know that they're not perfect, we need to work out a way of cohabiting with those who have different convictions and who sometimes hurt or offend us. Peter asks the Lord in our Gospel reading how this is meant to work. Perhaps he thought himself rather admirable and gracious for suggesting that he might forgive his brother or sister up to 7 times for such a sin. But Jesus soon pricks that bubble and raises the stakes much, much higher. Forgive not 7 times, but 77 times, he says, by which I think he means that we should actually stop counting and just get on with forgiving habitually. The story that Jesus tells illustrates this proposition. The kingdom of heaven is ruled by a king who is gracious and forgiving. We owe him big time, and a day of reckoning is coming where we will have to settle accounts. But those who cannot repay what they owe can be pardoned by his sheer mercy and released. Yet the emancipated slave in Jesus' parable does not react to grace as he should. He seizes by the throat those who owe him, and he extracts by force what is his due. These small debts should pale into insignificance alongside the incalculable debt that he himself has been forgiven. But he imitates neither his master's patience nor his pity, and he continues to live for himself alone. Yet we are to pray, "Forgive us our debts as we forgive those who are our debtors." Joseph in Genesis chapter 50, our Old Testament reading, Joseph is an example of how to forgive. His brothers are worried that he might do something to them now that Jacob, their father, is dead and no longer around to restrain his son from vengeance against them. They dare not even identify themselves as Joseph's brothers, referring to themselves, you notice, rather as servants of the God of your father and as Joseph's slaves. And yet, he is so far from paying them back in full for the wrong that they did to him, which they know they deserve, that he actually promises to provide for them and for their families. His eyes are not on retribution, which belongs to God alone, but on the guiding hand of divine providence, which transformed their evil intentions into a blessed result. And he also has his eyes on fulfilling, as they never did, his brotherly responsibilities. Familial responsibilities is actually the theme of our epistle reading too, from Romans chapter 14. The Apostle Paul reminds us not to pass judgment on one another, since we are ultimately accountable to God alone. We stand or fall, particularly in our opinions on secondary issues, before the Lord. We cannot pass judgment on someone else's servant. Paul warns us elsewhere that living in persistent sin excludes us from God's kingdom altogether. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 6, for example. But God welcomes all who walk with the Lord, whatever their opinions, on more debatable matters. So we too are not to despise or pass judgment on those who are our brothers and sisters in the kingdom. If people find it hard to follow this teaching, let us forgive them, of course, but also let us demonstrate in our response what we understand these passages to be commanding us.